Welcome back to video number 6. Our goal for today, given a cubic, a square root, or a cubic root function, you will be able to set up a table of values and graph. So today we're going to learn how to graph all other functions that you could ever be asked to graph. All right, so let's take a look at our first one. So this first one is called a cubic graph. So on the set of graphs below, we're going to graph, we might have to use a scale here, the function f of x equals x raised to the third. This is called a cubic function because x is raised to the third power. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take a look to see, well, what does this actually look like? So remember, f of x is just a fancy way of saying y equals. And now we're going to type in x. Now remember, the raised to button is going to be underneath the clear button, the raised to button. It's raised to the third power. All right, so let's go ahead and hit graph. Ooh, so look at that. That's what we want it to look like. We want it to look kind of like almost an S a little bit. All right, so in order to graph this, we're going to have to find some values that we can graph. So I'm going to hit second graph. Now, if I look carefully here, it looks like, all right, I've got some pretty large numbers, so it looks like we're going to have to use a scale in order to get this to fit. So remember, just like when we graph our other functions, we want to make sure we have a couple of negative x values and a couple of positive x values. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go from -3 all the way to +3. I want to make sure I get both sides of that y-axis there. So -27, -8, -1, 0, 1, 8, and 27. All right, once I have my table of values, I like to go back to the graph because I like to have a visual about what I want it to really look like. Okay, so now I'm going to keep that over to the side because I know that's what we want it to look like. And let's take a look. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and give us a little bit more space here to look at our graph here. All right, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make my x and y axes. So here's my y axis. I'm going to go right through the middle here. So we want to make sure we hit all 4 quadrants because we were not given a restricted domain. So we want to make sure we show the whole graph. So here we have our x and our y. So you know what, for this one, I'm not going to use a scale. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to count by ones because I can at least fit a few points on here. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, so we're going to go ahead and set up a couple of our scales here. -8, -1, -2, 3, 4. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to plot. So I'm not going to be able to plot my first and last one, but I can plot all of my other numbers on here. So let's go ahead and start at -2, -8. Put my first point there. And then -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, and all the way up to 8. Now, as I graph this, I'm going to connect my points that they gave us. So I'm just going to connect them. And then I also know that this graph, if I look back here, it is going to go on forever. So I'm going to continue going kind of up and upwards a little bit. And I'm going to put an arrow there. And then I'm going to go downwards, down and out, and put my arrow there. All right. So I do kind of want to make sure that this does kind of have a nice flow to it. So I'm going to kind of flow it up. And I want to make sure it kind of goes because it is a function, so it is continuous and it goes on forever in both directions. And again, we always want to make sure that we label. So y equals x to the third power. And now we've got it. All right, so let's go down to this question at the bottom now. So this is what we practiced a couple days ago. If g of x equals f of x times 0.2, how is the graph of f of x changed to form g of x? All right, so I know that f of x is equal to x to the third power. Now, if I look up here, they're telling me I'm trying to find my new function g of x. Now, from here, they're telling me g of x is equal to f of x times 0.2. So I don't want to change f of x at all. What do I want to do? I just want to multiply it by 0.2. So I'm going to take x to the third, and we're going to multiply it by 0.2. and then we're going to multiply it by 0.2. Now, usually we do put the coefficients in the front, so I'm going to rewrite this as g of x is equal to 0.2x to the third. All right, so now we have our new function. Now that we have our new function, let's plug it in the calculator and let's see how this is going to change our function. So I'm going to go to y equals. I'm going to keep my f of x in y1, and for y2, now I'm going to type in 0.2x. Remember, raised 2 is over here, the caret. Oops, look at that, I messed up my first one. X raised to the third power. Then I'm going to go down, now I'm in y2, and now I'm going to type in 0.2x raised to the third power. And now I'm going to hit graph. So here's my first function, and here's my second one. So what ended up happening? So my second function, it looks like, is it wider than the first one? Yes. So the second function, so g of x, is wider, which also means that it grows at a slower rate. All right, and then we've got it. So ladies and gentlemen, you now know how to graph a cubic function. All right, let's go ahead then, flip it over. And now we're going to take a look at graphing a square root function. So let's see what it looks like. So we're going to clear everything out. All right, the first thing I'm going to do, remember f of x is just a fancy way of saying y equals. So we're going to go ahead and type in the square root of x. Square root, and then we type in x. Now I want to know what this looks like, so I'm going to hit graph. Ooh, look at that. How many quadrants are we in? We are only in the first quadrant, so our values are always going to be just a positive. Okay, so in order to graph this, I do need to set up a table of values. I need to find a couple of points. But by looking at the graph first, am I going to need any negative values? Nope, I'm only going to need positive ones. So let's go second table. Now if you take a look, when x is negative, we get errors, so we don't even have to write any of those. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to start at 0, 0. Now I kind of look like, then we have 1, 1. And then I've got a couple decimals, but then if you look after those decimals, do we get another whole number? Yeah, we have 4 and 2. So I'm going to skip the decimals and I'm going to go right to that whole number 4, 2. All right, I'm going to keep going then. Let's see, do we have another one? There we go, 9, 3. So nothing says you have to plot every single point. You can strategize and pick out just perfect points, 16 and 4. All right, once I have a couple of points, now I can go ahead and graph this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to my screen so I know exactly what I want it to look like. Now, I don't need to draw all 4 quadrants here because this is only in quadrant 1. So I'm going to make my axes way over here. And then I might just go up like 2 because I don't need to. I could even actually, if I wanted to, I could have actually just used the edges and just made this one big graph, a quadrant 1 graph. But I already did it, so I'm going to start here. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, and I stopped at 16, so I'm going to stop there. And now let's plot our points. So 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, oh, we didn't have a 2, so we're going to go over to 4 and 2, 9 goes up to 3, 16 goes up to 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now remember, we want it to have this nice little curve to it, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sketch out that curve. All right, and there we go. Now we've got our nice curve. So there we go. And remember, at the end of a curve, it is going to keep on going, so we want it to keep growing. So we're going to put our arrow at the end. And remember, we always want to label our graph. Y equals the square root of x. And we've got it. All right, so now that we know how to graph the square root of it, let's take a look at how we can manipulate this equation to form a new one. All right, so I'm going to start by writing my f of x is equal to radical x, because that's what we started with up above. So part B, if g of x equals f of x times negative 1, how was the graph f of x changed to form the graph of g of x? Well, let's see. So we want to write our new equation g of x. Okay, well, g of x is equal to f of x. So we're not going to change f of x. We're going to keep it just like it is. But what are we going to do? We're going to multiply it by negative 1. So we're going to multiply radical x times negative 1. So radical x times negative 1. All right, I'm going to rewrite this, though. And I'm going to rewrite it as g of x is equal to, I'm going to put the negative in the front of the radical. So negative 1 radical x. So we have just formulated our brand new function. So let's see how this is going to change. So I'm going to go back to my y equals. I'm going to keep the square root of x in the first one, and then I'm going to go negative 1 square root of x for my second one. All right, and then I'm going to hit graph. Let's see. It's going to graph the first one first. Here's my second one. So what did it do? Well, it looks like it reflected over the x-axis. Axis. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that is your square root functions. All right, up next, our last one for today. We're going to take a look at cubic root functions. All right, so cubic root functions, you're going to have to watch very carefully to find this in the calculator. All right, so to find this in the calculator, all right, we're going to go to y equals. We're going to clear everything out. To get the cubic root, so it kind of looks like a square root, but there's a little 3 right there. To get to that, you're going to hit math, and then you're going to go down to choice 4. It's the cubic root. So you want to hit the math button, and then it is choice 4. All right, and now we're going to put an x in there. And let's say graph. What is this going to look like? Kind of looks like the first one we did, but this time it's turned sideways. All right, so we want to graph this. In order to graph this, we need to have a set of points. So I'm going to have to go to my x and my y. This time I have negative and I have positive x's, so I got to make sure I've got a little bit of both. So let's go to our table of values. I want to use some negatives and I want to use some positives. All right, and it looks like I have a lot of decimals once again here, so I might be a little bit, I might look for, let's see, we have 0, 0. I'm going to put that in my middle. I have 1, 1. And negative 1, negative 1. I'm going to look for a couple more negatives, but I want to be a little selective. I'm going to look, ooh, there we go. There's a perfect number. So negative 8, negative 2. And let's see if I can find another one. Let's see if I go up. Oh, I'm getting pretty big now, so it doesn't look like I'm going to, oh, there we go, negative 27 and negative 3. That's a long ways to go up there. All right, so let's go back down and let's see if we can find some positive values. Oh, there we go. Oh, wait, that's still negative. We're going with our positives. So I already have 1, 1. Let's see, I have 8 and positive 2. All right, and it looks like I'm not going to have any other ones again until we get to 27 and 3. So 27 and 3, that means, is this growing really fast? It's going to be growing really, really slow. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to hit the graph button because I know this is what I want it to look like. So I'm going to put my axes through the middle of my graph here. All right, and I don't think I'm going to be able to graph those first in the last one, so we're going to go ahead and graph the other ones. So negative 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, negative 2, negative 1, negative 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and up to 2. And now I'm just going to connect to the dots, continue on with arrows, connect to the dots, continue with arrows, and then at one of the edges I'm going to put its label. All right, so let's go ahead then and let's check out the last one. All right, so we have our f of x, which is equal to the cubic root. Now we want to have g of x, and here what we're going to do is we're going to take f of x and we're going to subtract 1. So the cubic root of x minus 1, and I know from my lesson the other day that when you subtract 1, it's going to shift down 1 unit.